So there are levels to thinking about money. And without, sounding like a law of attraction spiritual guru that sells a $50,000 boot camp for you to come manifest money at his private, courtyard, I do think it's important that we have the discussion of what really the higher laws of money actually are, and how following these laws has allowed me at a young age, the age of 22, to sell over $2 million worth of stuff on the internet and help a ton of other people do the exact same thing, following these laws. And just like the law of gravity, where if I drop this pin, it's gonna fall. In the same way, if you obey these laws, you will make more money. I've paid $50,000 cash to be in masterminds. I've paid, really hundreds of thousands of dollars total to be in the right rooms with people doing, multiple 7, 8 figures in 100, 200, 300, $800,000 a month in their businesses. And I continually observe patterns in these people and how they think. And, adopting these patterns has enabled me to, build a pretty incredible business. And so whether these people realize that they're following these patterns or not, whether the wealthy elites realize they're following these patterns or not, really, money follows the same rules. It doesn't care how good of a person you are, how bad of a person you are. It doesn't care how much you care. It doesn't care how much you don't care. It cares about just a few simple things, and if you understand them, you can make a lot of money. So I'm going to stop hyping up the laws, and I'm just going to kind of get into it. So throughout this video, I'm going to reference the classic, timeless work by George S. Clason. And in this book called The Richest Man in Babylon, he references a lot of, similar principles and similar laws of money that enable you to make more of it. So I'm going to kind of start from the top and work my way down. And granted, please understand before I get into this that these aren't easy to implement. But if you do implement them, you'll have more than enough wealth coming your way, more than enough, opportunity coming your way. And you'll find, yourself in a similar situation to myself where it's just like opportunity just kind of falls on my lap and I'm not even really looking for it or asking for it. It's just like, oh, there's a new opportunity for me to make an extra 30 or 40 grand, or, oh, here's an opportunity for me to make an extra 100 grand. And, opportunities will just kind of fall in your lap in various ways if you follow these things well. So let's get into it. So let me start with money law number 1. And money law number 1 is essentially that reputation is king. Whether you like it or not, a reputation takes time to develop. And if you can invest in your reputation by treating the individual people that you work with, both on your team or as clients, or the people that you work with, with dignity and respect, and show clear and firm boundaries to the policies that you and your company stick to, while also being lenient and generous and careful in your dealings, you will find that reputation compounds over time. And to be honest, this is something that as a 22-year-old with a lot of opportunity, a lot of cash in the bank, it can be hard to remember that every little thing matters. And so this video is not just saying, oh, I've mastered the laws, because honestly, $2 million isn't I haven't made that much. There's people that have made 10 million, 20, 50 million by 22, and everybody's journey is different, right? So these are lessons and principles that I'm attempting to apply as well. But money law number 1 is reputation is king. And you can shortcut reputation by putting out content, like what I'm doing here. You can run advertisements, like what we do in my company, or you can, have a referral program or whatever. But at the end of the day, what you do in secret will come to pass, and the person that you are when the door is shut will eventually be revealed as the person that you are in public. So money law number 1 is to be everything you say you are and manage your reputation like you manage the garden that provides the only food you will eat for the rest of your life. It is that important. So let's move on to money law number 2. Money law number 2 is that willpower doesn't work. And what I mean by willpower doesn't work, shouldn't you be hustling your way into money? Shouldn't you be, stepping as far as you can forward and maybe even burning relationships if they get in the way? Or, shouldn't you be, competing aggressively against the people around you? And shouldn't you even be, up early and pushing hard and going heavy? And there's a time for that, but willpower at some point burns out. Willpower, you can almost visualize it as a candlestick. And if you light that candle, eventually that wax is going to burn and burn, and that the wick itself it might last a while. It'll produce some heat, but eventually, inevitably, you will run out of that wick. You will run out of that motivation, that willpower. Instead of willpower, instead of forcing your way into wealth and into riches and into, prestige, environment is king. Environment beats willpower every single day. And so what aspects do I personally look for in a positive environment? And how can you replicate these aspects in your life to attract, more wealth? It's the obvious next question. If environment is the secret, then what do you need in your environment? So here's a few things that come to mind. The first is the right people. When I was first getting started in entrepreneurship, I was 17 years old, and I'd just seen, my otherwise pretty well-off parents go through one of the most traumatic seasons of my young adult life, of their adult life, seeing us struggle in a crazy way. And for the first time ever, seeing my dad legitimately on his knees begging for mercy and asking, for provision from God himself. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And at that time, I decided I was going to get started in entrepreneurship because I was like, well, if like my dad, struggles, then I want to know that I can help. And luckily, he never ended up needing my help. You can watch the whole video on my story another time. But immediately what I did was I got rid of friends that I knew weren't good for me. And I got rid of the people that I knew didn't think the way that I thought. And I have all the respect and love in the world for these people. But if they aren't on the same mission, then you're going to lose a necessary synergy that you otherwise would have if you were on the same mission with the people that are now in your life. And so at the time, I hung out with people who maybe had a grand or two in the bank that kind of worked normal jobs. Now today, at any time, I could pick up my phone and call a buddy who I know for a fact has $5 million liquid in the bank and ask him, hey, what do you think of this problem I'm facing in my business? Or hey, what do you think here? And I've got, monthly masterminds with key people, just, sharing notes and learning from each other with people that I know are doing very well in their business, whether it's in my industry or another industry. And I've got these friends where we all elevate each other and push each other forward. And in my view, that's what friendships are for. Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And this verse inspired me to co-found a small accountability group of other men with one of my buddies, Richard, who I know he does about $500,000 a month in his business, $600,000 a month. And he and I were like, one day, let's start this small group of men and get together once a week over Zoom and hold each other accountable to a high standard of living. And that's what we do, and we've all benefited from it. So I've been very intentional with the people that I'm around because I know that people are the first element of environment. The next element of environment is physical identity, I guess you could say backers, like physical elements in your life that back the identity that you want to have as a business owner. And this is, again, something not everybody will understand, but when you're just getting started or when you're trying to get to another level, like even myself right now, I'm trying to get to another level. Like I'm doing pretty well financially, but I am like, you always have to grow. You have to constantly be growing, otherwise you're going to die. And so, like, recently I bought, a $110,000 car. It's a Tesla Model X. And it's like this kind of, I feel like it's this car that only somebody who runs a $5 or $6 million a year company could justify owning. And it's like, all right, I'm going to buy that and I'm going to use it as a reminder of, kind of my identity. And some people are like, what the frick, bro? That's just spending money on a car. Like, what a subtle way to flex a car, Trey. And honestly, you might be right. Like, this whole video is just basically a subtle flex. But no, legitimately, it's not. And I mean this with the best of intentions, that car legitimately does make me feel like an operator of a significantly large company. Driving it around, the white leather on the seats and the fact that it's like, one of Tesla's nicest cars, and Tesla's like one of the fastest growing car companies on the planet right now. And I love Elon Musk's worldview and his personality, and it just kind of makes me feel the part. And it was also a really nice tax write-off. Another thing is watches. I've developed a key relationship with one of my local dealers, and this right here is a $40,000, or it sells for actually like $40,000 to $50,000 depending on where you're going to sell it. It's a Rolex Daytona, and for me, this is a just piece that reminds me, like, the only people that I saw were wearing a watch like this were people that were doing very well for themselves, and so it's just that reminder of who I am, because you'll find that in culture, and especially living where I live, like I live in Indiana, it's actually a pretty humble state financially. You have these constant pulls, people trying to pull you back, and they mean the best. They genuinely feel like their way of doing life is the best way, and that's because that's the way they do it. They think that their way of doing things is the best way to do it, and because they think that, they're going to try and give you their best way of doing things. And so, for example, like when I first got a Jaguar F-Type, I would drive it around, and a lot of my like Christian friends would be like, oh, careful about having a love of money. And I agree with them. I don't want to love money. Like, money is supposed to be easy to acquire. It's not something I need to think about that much. It just needs to kind of come to me, and then I can do more important things with my time. Like, to be honest, that's how I view money. Just build the system, let it come. But I was accused of like, oh, you have a love of money, right? It's why you drive nice cars. You have a love of money. And so people will always try to push on you their version of the best way of living. And so if you can have physical reminders in your environment, this is also why when I first moved out, I just got my business off the ground about 2 years after, a lot of the traumatic events that I went through when I was, seeing my family really struggle, and I just committed to getting up early and working. It took me like a year to make my first 10 grand, and then the next year I did like 200 grand. And that year I moved out. I moved into a nice apartment that cost like $4,000 a month. It was like on the nicest strip in my city. And like, for example, like my fiance, when she learned that I live in that apartment, it was funny, like her brother tells me the story of him telling her where I live, and she was like, no way, like that's actually where he lives. And like, yeah, that's where I live. And it was just this like status thing, and all of a sudden what was cool is it became more real to everybody too. It's like, oh, Trey's actually doing something. And that was helpful for my identity as well, because then I just had this different aura when I would walk in the room, and people would treat me differently because, whether we like it or not, it's important on some level. In my view, this is my personal view, unless you're in an environment where people can recognize your status otherwise, it's important that you have status objects, because otherwise, you're going to get treated just about the same, and it's just kind of chip away at your view of yourself. And this is my view, and I think this is definitely the view I'm going to have in my 20s, no doubt, because this is a growth season for me. I'd say in my 30s or 40s, I really want to be quite humble, and I don't really want to enjoy nice things. Like, I want to sell it all. And I've even in my 20s gone through seasons of like selling it all because I feel like that's the right thing to do. And then I'll go back and I'll buy more stuff, and it's just like this back and forth. But at the end of the day, I always remind myself that it's like, a physical reminder of the identity that I'm trying to embody. Now let's move on to money law number 3. Money law number 3 is that people are essentially selfish. And as virtuous as somebody may come across, and as desiring of like humility and trying to keep themselves lowly as they may seem, there's selfish desire even in trying to be humble, like because they don't want other people to see them as arrogant or whatever. And so everybody on an inherent level is selfish. And I think we need more words than just the one word. Honestly, in English, we only have the one word, which is selfish, self-seeking. And it's almost like people assume that by having a self-seeking nature that you're somehow taking something from other people. But, I digress. That's probably like a whole other video I need to make, because right now I'm just focused on this third money law, and I'm not going to make a whole, rant on like the virtue of being selfish and when to be and how to be. But if you can understand that people are fundamentally selfish, then selling to them actually becomes much easier, and giving them something that they want becomes much easier. I was in Walt Disney World recently with my fiance, and we just took this week-long trip just as a break from work, honestly, like because I had a crazy push season. I'd built a massive team and things were going pretty good, and it was cool like being in Disney World and seeing my business still do like 30 grand that week. It was pretty sweet, which is actually still kind of a low week. I think we could do like 60, 70 grand a week. But again, whatever. I just saw this like sign we were in Disney World, Florida, and in Hollywood Studios, there's a section of, Hollywood Studios that is like dedicated to like Toy Story. And I know this sounds like a weird reference, but on the wall in one of the areas, there was this like quote from Walt Disney. And it said like, don't build what you want to build what the people want and give it to them. And Walt Disney is one of these people that I've studied and kind of looked into and tried to understand his way of thinking. And, when it comes down to it, he was a selfish person too. He knew that if he could give people stories that they desire and, a sense of love for characters that they desire and kind of this like childlike, genuine, almost reintroducing back into adults that childlike love of like play and good stories and romance, that he can give people something that they want. And he knew that other people were selfish, and he was selfish because he knew that if he gave other people what they wanted, he could make a lot more money and build a massive business. And he did. He built one of the largest media conglomerates that, the world has ever seen and probably ever will see. And I don't think anybody's even come close to what Disney's been able to achieve, because he tapped into the human's selfish desire to escape from the world and become a child again. And that's what he was able to build. And so for yourself, you have to think, does my service appeal to an inherently selfish desire? Now, I will never say, You want to be selfish? Buy my stuff. It'll be a bit more subtle than that. Like, obviously, we help people start and grow successful businesses. And a lot of people that want to grow a successful business because they have the selfish desire of taking care of themselves and taking care of their family and building wealth. And maybe they even want status, or they want to be seen a certain way, or they want to prove something to somebody. And I'm very well aware of this. And that's why I'm very open about my story and about the fact that I've been able to do these things, because it helps spur people forward to work with me and invest in our stuff and get our help. So that's the final law of money. And hopefully these 3 laws have been helpful. You know, there's always more to learn about how money works and how people work. But what you'll find is how money works is just reflections of how people work. Because if you look at all of the laws I've shared with you today, none of them are actually related to money. They're actually all related to people. And if you can understand people and you can understand their base desires and their base needs, then you can make as much money as you want. So I'll end it there. Hopefully this has been a valuable video. Enjoy the rest of the channel and see you in the next one.